Weak and wobbly, that's the focus of tonight's angle. This is how little the progressives fear and respect the leader of their party when he's overseas. In a tweet directed at Biden, Rashida Tlaib referred to the Israeli-Hamas conflict as your war and accused our ally Israel of bombing the hospital. And today she doubled down.
Just continue to watch people think it's okay to bomb a hospital where children, I can cry, we all can cry. President Biden, not all of America's with you on this one. And you need to wake up and understand that.
Tlaib obviously holds Biden in utter contempt. She's certainly not afraid of any political consequences from him. But then again, why are we surprised? This is the problem that Biden is facing everywhere, because everyone in the world knows that he's weak and that the U.S. is weak under his leadership. And filling this vacuum are America's adversaries. Leaders from 140 countries, oh, that's all, are gathered in Beijing to celebrate the 10th anniversary of China's trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative. Putin's there because he believes Xi is a serious man and that China is the future. Now, it was no accident that their statements, Russia's and China's, criticizing Israel and demanding a ceasefire almost seemed coordinated. Taking the other side against America, after all, gave them an opportunity to band together and show the world that America's on the downslope. And Iran, under Biden, they feel the same way. They're not overly concerned by America's warnings. Those people just gave him $6 billion. Heck, even the president of a NATO country, Viktor Orban of Hungary, he seemed perfectly at ease appearing with Putin in Beijing yesterday. Now, might he have thought that would offend the White House? He clearly doesn't care. But under Trump, none of them were so cavalier about this kind of stuff. During Trump's presidency, Xi rushed to meet at Mar-a-Lago in the spring of 2017, and Trump bombed Syria during dessert. Putin wanted a closer relationship with the United States, but the deep state, they made sure that never happened with the phony Russia-Kalusia stuff. He never would have tried taking Ukraine. We all know this. If Trump were president, he would not dare. Strength gets results. Remember, it was because of Trump that NATO countries finally pledged to spend more money on their military. Canada and Mexico, they agreed to revamp NAFTA because Trump's team knew how to exercise leverage, do it from a position of strength. But now, both our allies and our adversaries know that America is not looking out for America. So they don't respect us. We don't respect ourselves. They don't respect Biden. They don't respect his top advisors either. They look at someone like a Janet Yellen as a nice old lady more interested in sucking up to China than protecting her own country's economy. They look at Tony Blinken and they see a small, weak man easily pushed around. Just a few days ago, a total snub by the Saudi crown prince, humiliating Blinken, by making him wait several hours before he finally met with him at his farm residence. Now, some of this might seem like small ball, but in the world of diplomacy, small gestures speak volumes. But presidents who are considered generally our best presidents have been able to unite Americans and defend our national interest. They had gravitas and were passionately pro-American.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In the 20th century, Americans got used to the idea that the president would represent our interests in the world and would explain coherently the challenges that we all face. Doing that would then inspire confidence, make us all more willing to sacrifice, actually excited to sacrifice, especially in the foreign policy arena where so much is at stake. But unfortunately, the media and the unelected bureaucracy in Washington, they think that having a figurehead president is just fine. After all, it gives them more power and influence. This morning in Israel, it looked like Blinken was in charge. But has Tony Blinken ever intimidated anyone in his life? Look at Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor's comments about how things were really calm in the Middle East a few weeks ago. Now, under the best of circumstances, and I'm saying the best of circumstances, where we had a president and a cabinet able to deftly assess the situation, this would be a really tough needle to thread. But with this guy,
I asked the Secretary of State when he and I were working in the Senate to write something for him, and he said, he wrote a line that I think is appropriate. He said, it's not, we lead, not just, well, I won't go into it. I'll wait later. Taking too much time.
Oh my gosh, watching this, I'm thinking the poor Israelis have had to stand to listen to this. Haven't they suffered enough? And imagine what the press would say if a Republican president injected himself into the middle of an unfolding crisis, then referred to the barbaric terrorists who spurred it on this way.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
Was he sleeping? The other team? They would crucify Trump if he said anything like that, if he acted that way. In fact, the global chaos, though, that we're seeing under Biden, remember, that is exactly what the regime media said when they predicted Trump would create this madness around the world.
President Trump has essentially minimized or sublimated the idea of the U.S. as kind of the underpinning of a rules-based international order.
President Trump, we've had bad presidents before, bad foreign policy presidents. We have absolutely hit bottom, and it's frightening.
Donald Trump is really ruining and destroying American foreign policy.
Yeah, well, what are we seeing around us now? Peace and calm, are they breaking out all over the place with Joe Biden as president? We had peace when Donald Trump was president. But now the Middle East is on fire. Ukraine's in the middle of a war. But for Reagan, it was peace through strength. Remember? For Biden, it's chaos through weakness. Or actually, that's much too much for him to remember, so.
My message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't.
The press, as usual, dutifully campaigns and covers for him.
The Democratic president of the United States attempting to conduct global diplomacy, attempting to be, in some ways, a peacemaker in the Middle East. He is out there representing the United States of America.
And, of course, the historians open up a second line of defense.
The president's now done this twice. He went to Kyiv. This is a remarkable moment in the history of the American presidency for a president to go this soon into this kind of climate.
Joe Biden went to both places in the middle of a war, risked his life to try to bring some order to the chaos.
The truth is, and they all know it, Biden did not go to Israel because he's strong. He went to Israel because he's weak. And he's desperately trying to resurrect his failing presidency by playing peacemaker, while most of the important players are just ignoring him. And that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.